pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and justice for all. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call our meeting today to order. We begin with approval of minutes of June 2nd and June 9th. We could do them separate or together. Your choice, commissioners. Motion to approve one or both.
I'll make a motion to approve both sets of minutes, June 2nd and 9th.
Thank you, Wayne. Is there a second? Second. All right, I have motion to approve both and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. We'll now proceed to commissioner reports and comments. Vice President Baker, would you like to start?
Good morning, everyone. I've had a couple of calls on the CARES Act program, and I know they're landlords, and I guess they wanted to know how they could qualify for some help or assistance. They have tenants that aren't paying their rent. They have mortgages that are due. That's their business, and I didn't know if Susan could help me with some information as to how to
would
possibly.
landlords be eligible for that business stabilization grant? Since, yeah, you can come up and speak on the mic. Thank you. That's a good question because a lot of landlords are incorporated as a business. So,
I mean, they're really stuck.
They can't even evict, can they?
No,
no.
that's the governor's orders, or the executive order, I should say.
We did not originally include property management companies as in large conglomerate LLC type companies. If we want to accept those that have multiple leases, whether they're commercial or residential type things, we can certainly open it up to that. I mean, the last day to apply is today. We didn't change the guidelines when we went into the second 2 weeks. So, I mean, ultimately, they're asking for revenue replacement. Their overhead, which is not a qualified use. If they're not getting lease money, that's their revenue. That's not qualified. We can't, by the federal guidelines, we can't replace lost revenue. They don't have a whole lot of operating expenses, so they would have to show where they've not been able to pay operating expenses. So if they could have done that.
Is a mortgage an operating expense?
Um,
And I'm sure once all of this, the dust settles on all of this, their property owners are going to be really crushed with some.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to look back at the guidelines to see. I mean, operating expenses were things like, obvious operating expenses, leases and mortgages if you're a business running, in a commercial space, but then also payroll, utilities, insurance premiums, those kinds of things were considered operating expenses. It's hard to justify. It takes it another level up to say that their operating expenses are down. I don't know what overhead they would have other than the cost of the building, and they should be
Have you had
getting.
any commercial businesses apply that couldn't pay that claimed mortgage payment on their commercial, like a restaurant? Well, then what's the difference? I don't see the difference.
Because that's part of that business's operating expense to pay their mortgage or their lease. So, but I understand what you're saying. So if that's what we're saying, that they could have claimed that the 10 commercial spaces they own, they can't pay their mortgage to their lender because they're not getting their revenue in. That would have been, yeah.
Is that something you could review and come back with a more definitive answer?
Susan, you say today's the last day. Is that imposed by the CARES Act or?
No, it's just
So
where
could
we
extend
left our
this
last
if we needed to.
extension.
How much money remains roughly?
I'm going to give a report during staff comments. If you want, if I can come back, or we.
Yeah, we want your staff comments for
Okay.
that. Is that okay
Yeah.
that she can come out and give a full report on that?
If we can talk more about.
Yeah, that would include that. All
Sure.
right.
I expect you're going to ask for an extension.
That's up for discussion. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Susan. Terry, you have any more comments?
No, that's like I said. I've just had some conversations on that issue this week, and I understand their concern and need.
Commissioner Kiefer, would you have some comments, please?
Just generally, I know we're going to talk about it more, but thanks to Susan for working on the grant funding that goes out to the businesses and the nonprofits. I've received several calls just checking on the status, and your staff has been very quick to get me the answer for the business. So thank you.
Good. Wayne, anything else? Thank you. Commissioner Mimmelschmidt? Commissioner Wagner?
I don't really have anything. I did want to thank everybody for it, just as Wayne said. They've been a good resource for me. I just give y'all's number out. So, and there's been, it's amazing to me that people still don't know that they can apply for that. It's crazy. I mean, and to their credit, I've had people tell me that they won't apply. They don't want government money. They're doing well. They're blessed, and they just don't. So, I mean, to each his own. I respect that. But, you know, we're just trying to keep the businesses going and make them a little stronger here in the county. That's all I have.
Is there anything I would add is I've noticed on our Facebook page, we've been featuring some of the businesses who have received business expansion supplement or funding. And I think that's a very positive message that program is working and helping some of these businesses. So with that being said, staff comments. Front row, Susan, Sarah, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sarah Greaves, Chief Financial Officer. Wanted to come before you today to give a brief update on the infra grant that we applied for back at the end of February. If you recall, it was for $55 million for a 3.5-mile widening area of I-81, roughly between exit 1 and exit 5. We did unfortunately not receive the grant that we applied for. It was denied. Staff did request a debrief, but we expect that won't occur until the end of July or maybe early August of this year. So once we have more information, we'll be able to report back.
Was there a ranking or scoring sheet for that could tell us where we placed or why?
I believe there probably was, but I think that'll, we'll get additional information at the debrief. So unfortunately, Scott Hobbs was unavailable today. He's out, so.
That infra grant, that was from the state, correct?
The infra grant, I believe, was a federal
Federal,
grant.
okay.
Federal
Would it be
grant.
issued through the state? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
And this is the grant that we set aside the $1 million for?
It is. And so to that also, I wanted to speak about that today because there's a couple options. We could leave the $1 million in reserves for another application for either this grant or there's an additional potential grant called Routes. It seems like that grant may be more friendly or rural focused. I do believe that Scott had some interest in applying for similar reasons to that grant, so we could continue it in reserves in that amount of $1 million. The commissioners, of course, always have the discretion to unreserve it.
What, that million, what could it be, if we didn't, what could it be used for?
Personally, under the current economic climate, I would just recommend to leave it in
No,
reserves.
but that's what I mean. I'm thinking like a rainy day, you know, keep it back and because the way the budget's going. and-
Yeah, it's in our capital reserve,
Yeah.
so we would want to
I mean,
use
if
it
we
for a
needed it, we could
one-time-
use it, I mean, if.
You
things-
could, and
yeah.
even if you left it in reserves right now for the routes application, if we do that in the future, you could always unreserve it and use it for something else. The commissioners have
Okay,
the
that's what I
ability to do
wanted to know.
that.
So we could, if we got into a fix on a certain thing, we could. use it.
Yeah,
looks like it
from a
could be a-
financial perspective, I
Could
would
be
just,
a decade for wherever considered to improve 81. The way we could be
it could, yeah, it
with
could
funding in the
be,
economy.
right. So, and I mean, I think once we meet with the federal officials to know, you know, why there was a denial, we may know more to move forward to say, do we want to keep that in reserves or can we pull it back? I mean, right now, is it okay to keep it reserved for?
I think we should keep it in reserves at this point.
For now.
Find out about Scott and the other one, and then the debriefing.
Right,
And then at
and
that
the
It'd be
potential
interesting to
routes.
see why we weren't included. Okay, thank you.
be able to make an informed decision.
Okay,
Sarah, anything else?
thank you, that is all. Thank you.
Appreciate the update. Continuing staff comments. Thank you, Sarah.
Hey, Sarah, I do, I think you could answer the question, not now, but I'd like to have some information on all of the gas tax that's collected at these truck stops in Washington County. Who gets that money, and what is it supposed to be earmarked for? I mean, we're probably collecting millions and millions and millions of dollars in fuel tax, and they're not using it on 81 there in Washington County, and that's where the truck stops are.
Well, that's even just our visitors and us filling up, that goes into the state coffer, right?
Yes.
It's returned through highway user revenue. And we've had our highway
Oh,
user
yeah.
revenue cut from 10+ million several years ago. It's back up, what, around 1.5 to 2 million?
Yep, it's
that
about 2
correct?
million, and we just got
So,
word for fiscal year
Terry,
2020.
you're absolutely correct. No matter where they're filled up at, we're not getting our fair share of our money back. But it would be nice to see what
much?
Washington County was contributing to the gas tax.
I'll see if I can
What do you
find
think,
that for you.
Commissioner Baker?
Nothing urgent, just
Okay,
a call.
I'll look
That
into it.
would be interesting to see what we're contributing here from this county, what we're returning. Very good. Susan, introduce yourself.
Good morning, Susan Buchanan, Director, Office of Grant Management. I'm here this morning just to provide an update on the Together We Serve grant program that is offered through the Office of Grant Management, that is directed towards human service providing nonprofits that are providing maybe additional services during the COVID-19 pandemic, and then helping them do that safely and with the modifications they need to provide those vital services. The application was released June 10th, and since that time, we've received 38 applications requesting $520,398. 24 have been approved for a total of $345,552. Sorry, get those hundreds in. The remaining are either still in the approval process pending more information or have been denied. Eligible uses of the funding include provision of essential supplies and food, costs of personal protective equipment for employees that are providing frontline services, costs associated with virtual delivery of services, costs related to ensuring emergency and homeless shelters can operate safely, temporary positions that are needed for increased demands, or eviction prevention and utility shut-off prevention programs. There is a little over $1.1 million that have been allocated from the CARES Fund for this program, and the applications are currently still being accepted on an ongoing basis through October.
What happens if we don't spend all of that money? I'm assuming we will, but what happens if we don't?
Looking at, as we get further into it, we're still getting applications being submitted. So as we get further down the road and I see where maybe applications have stopped, we might want to come back and look at it and see if there would be any modifications to the program that could be made, maybe allowing organizations who may have received the funding and already spent it that could still use additional funding, looking at those types of things, looking at if there's a need somewhere else that we could take the funds and put them towards that.
Susan, do you know the monies allocated for nonprofit grants versus the for-profit grants that Susan Small will speak of? The breakdown of how much money goes to each grant pool, was that our decision at the county level, or was that the federal decision?
It was local.
It was local. So if need be, could money be
Yes.
reallocated if the demand just isn't there for
Yes.
either nonprofit or for-profit?
There is flexibility there.
Okay.
Yes. And I just wanted to make a point, because we just had talked about the assistance for landlords. This funding does help the nonprofits that are providing eviction prevention, which would be giving some individuals money to help pay their rent to avoid eviction, which then it helps those individuals, but then in an indirect manner helps the landlords that are renting to those individuals. So that's something just worth noting.
Would there be a way to get the landlords that are affected by this to contact you so they could contact their rentees and say, hey, you can apply for this?
It would be the organization, the nonprofit provides the program that would give the,
Yeah.
so, but we could tell those individuals what nonprofit provides that type of assistance.
Okay.
Yes, definitely.
But if you're not collecting rent and you can't evict your tenants, essentially you're running a rental business. It's nonprofit. The owners of the properties.
Yeah, the bank will eventually own your business, your building.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other
And
questions?
another thing, when it comes time to repay all of this money, because we're the federal government borrowing trillions to bail everybody out. When it comes time to pay all of this money back, the people that they're going to come after first are the property owners. They always want to throw everything on the back of a property owner. So, the landlords are going to be hit hard at some point in time when it comes time to pay all of this money back. They're just my thoughts.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Terry, I want to go back to your one comment about the gas tax. It was the first or second year that Delegate Weibel was in Annapolis, and I asked him to research how much we are collecting at the emissions station here in Washington County compared to the gas tax, and I think we were way under $1 million for the user money for paving, and the mission statement, station, if I remember correct, was collecting a little over $1 million in fees for our cars for their exhaust, but yet we weren't even getting $1 million back on our highway user revenue. So that would be a good statistic to find out if we are getting our fair share back. So thank you for that. Continuing with staff reports, who's next? Please introduce yourself and the matter. Thank you, Susan.
Sure. Good morning again. Susan Small, Director of Business Development. Give you a brief update from the Rise Up Stabilization Grant. So to date, this was as of close of business yesterday, we've processed 586 applications. That means they've come in, we've processed them for completion, and they've gone either into review or have been through review and they need additional documentation, or my staff is following up with them individually on questions or concerns that we have as they go through review. Once they get approved through the review process, they go into purchasing's hand for a vendor number request, and then from there it goes to budget and finance for the check. So right now, we have processed through both the vendor requests and the check requests about 2.95 million, which represents 287 applications. So we're only halfway through the ones that we've received. That said, I don't want to say it's only, because it's a lot of work and it's a team effort. So I just want to thank Rick's staff and Sarah's staff and Susan B's staff, because everyone has pitched in to make this happen. So that projects us at about 6 million that has been used, plus or minus, just depending on what comes in today. And then if we want to extend, so that's question kind of number one, do we want to keep going? That leaves us with just around 3 million, give or take, in the remaining funds of the money that we allocated for small business stabilization. So we can continue the process and extend it, doing more PR push. I just want to thank all the commissioners for the phone calls and what you've done to get businesses actively calling us and applying. It's Wetsuit Warehouse just dropped theirs off this morning, so thank you for that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, that's been a huge help, and that's one thing that we can look at extending another 2 weeks or whatever we want to do.
Again, Susan, just one quick question. You said 586 and 287 processed. Is, again, just to refresh my memory, I asked that question last time, I forgot. How many businesses do you guess at are eligible in Washington County?
How many small businesses in Washington County?
Yeah, so thousands.
8,000,
I mean, in the city
5,000?
alone, we estimated around 1,100.
Right.
So if you put that county-wide, we could be in the 3,000 to 4,000 range. That doesn't mean they're all eligible. The hard part is they have to be able to show us eligibility through their profit and loss statements year over year. We need to be able to see that they were a profitable business, they were in business in 2019, and they've experienced a hardship because of COVID-19
It's safe to say if everybody applied that was eligible, we'd be out of money.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I would say we have to extend it.
I mean, that was our hope, was that we'd have 1,000 businesses apply.
Are we still seeing the applications coming in at a consistent speed?
They've definitely slowed down, but yes, we're still receiving them. I'd say for the last 2 weeks, it may be 8 or 10, 12 a day. People are still trying to pull documentation together. So, I know that was a big challenge. The businesses who applied right up front probably already had their documentation from another application, maybe from one of the other programs. So that made it easy for them. But there are many who have had to go back to their CPAs or pull together their own profit and loss statements. And so we've helped them through that.
I've talked to many businesses that they don't do an annual profit loss
Right,
statement. So
I
they have
know,
to get
yeah.
their accountant, and their accountants, of course, right now, tax day
They're
is
swamped.
15th,
Yeah.
so.
And that's why we've said, call us, because we have people on staff between our staff and the staff with the city who's assisting us through this, who can help them through that. And ultimately, we just need the documentation. It's easier for us to ask for it up front than it is to have to go back in the end. So the other thing I wanted to mention this morning is we have an opportunity as kind of not new guidelines, but just some updated, better wording in some of the federal guidelines came out. We have an opportunity to work with our CVB on possibly using some of this funding, which is an allowable use. They have a presentation or a proposal put together to use money in a phased manner. So we would do sort of a phase one would be promoting just safe travel, utilizing our nearby drive markets, our recreation, outdoor parks, any of the towpath, that kind of thing. And that way, and Dan even has the byways exploration and museums and historic sites. So it's specific to that industry. It doesn't say we're 100% open for business here, come back in and, we'll invite you back. What we want is for folks to feel comfortable coming to use our outdoor recreation. So in being able to promote our tourism industry is what Dan would like to do. And he's got a nice proposal that I'd be happy to provide for you, but it's to assist and stabilize the tourism industry.
Susan, a question along the same vein there. Would monies be available to our municipalities? Think the big box stores largely could be open during COVID, but mom and pop stores along main streets.
There is the ability to transfer some of this funding to municipalities if the municipality can show that they are the one that experienced the hardship. So
I
if
think
it's for
that's
business
probably-
stabilization, it wouldn't be allowable, but if it were for the specific municipality,
I think
believe
that
it
might be
is.
very, very doable for a lot of our municipalities, and maybe we can allocate some money towards our municipalities for help with that. They've suffered too.
Now,
Yeah.
would this money come out of the business money, that 8.9 million?
Or is it-
For
you're
the
talking about CARES
municipalities?
Act?
Yes.
I think it's just a general CARES Act allowance. I mean, I read it in the new guidelines, but there's probably some
Now,
deeper things we need
Have
to
you, Mr.
get
Brown, been
into.
meeting on any of these CARE Act distributions of money for CVB or these municipalities? Have they
Have we-
been discussed?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Well, Has any of this been discussed with Tom Brown and Earl? Because they're actually, aren't they meeting? Or Tom, would you want to add to that? Because it's,
So just to clarify real quick, the money we're talking about that Wayne mentioned and CVB, it doesn't come out of the remaining 3 million. Is that correct?
I would suggest a lot of this be an agenda item instead of just staff comments, because this is pretty important